this video, I'm going to describe the construction techniques to create the back of a suit coat. The first thing you want to do is remind yourself of which way the front overlaps the other front, which side the buttonholes are on, and which side the buttons are on, because that is going to inform you as to which way the back vent laps. They both lap to the same side, which in menswear, the left side overlaps the right side, buttonholes, buttons. Left side overlaps the right side. So the left half of the coat on the front overlaps the right on the front, and then on the back, the left side, this being now reversed, the left side of the body overlaps the right side. That's how you can remember which way to press the vent on the back so that you get it going in the correct way. There are two areas that we want to reinforce with interfacing. One is the back shoulder area from neck to about midpoint here, and I like to carry that down under the arm's eye, so that entire arm's eye is well supported. The other area is the vent. We want that to be nice and crisp so that it hangs straight. This is a pattern for a 38 long, so the pattern is longer than our 42 regular jacket, but it's still useful for instruction purposes. So here's the center back, neck, shoulder, arm's eye, the side back, and then the extra center back vent is cut on all in one. On the underside, it is constructed to just stick out and be clean finished that way so that we have a nice underlap. On the top side here that we fold under, that extra provides the facing. The two areas that we want to cut interfacing for are the portion of the vent and the upper saddle portion here. This is often cut, usually cut on the bias. You can see the bias, this is cut straight of grain, this is cut bias. That's so that the two grains can reinforce each other and give a nice firm appearance to that shoulder area, that good strong shoulder that we often want in the coat. So here's the back pattern and the back saddle piece, and here is a sample showing that bias of the back saddle, and apparently this sample is not cut from this pattern. That's fine. You can still see that the center back seam, neck, shoulder, arm's eye, and that side back seam get cut. There are a couple different methods of applying the saddle to the wool. This saddle is cut out of flat wiggin. It's just a firmly woven cotton fabric. You could use a poly cotton. I've also seen it cut out of lightweight hymo. I think for my hand that's a little firm, but it certainly produces a good effect, whatever is the choice, and it probably depends on the weight and thickness of the wool that you're using in your suit. There are a couple different construction application techniques. On this side, the seam allowance has been cut in the same increment as the wool seam allowance, and that would just be flatlined on by machine. On this side, if you were using a heavier material for the saddle, you might elect to trim away the seam allowance in the saddle and apply it with some tailor's tape to reduce bulk in the seam allowance. It's entirely up to you. The thing to remember is that the saddle is cut on the bias, and it's best to reduce bulk by merely lapping and top stitching that center back seam rather than a conventional plain seam. This is just flatter. To begin the construction of the back, Seam the two backs together from the top of the vent up to the neck. You'll need to do, leaving the vent open, you'll need to be brave and do an artful diagonal clip here at the top of the vent so that the vent can be all to one side while the center back seam is pressed open. That's a scary piece to do the very first time, that clip, and so, call your teacher and do that clip. It's on the diagonal, which reduces the fraying out. Cuts on diagonal don't fray like cuts on the straight do. While we're down here at the vent, then there are a couple ways to apply that vent interfacing. This is a very lightweight fusible that it's cut without seam allowance, and it's just fused in the vent area. On the other side, for demonstration purposes, I've cut a woven out of that same flat wiggin and cross-stitched that on. Either way, you want the edge of this interfacing exactly on that pressed edge so that when you press it and overlap it, it is nice and crisp right there. Then you would press up the hem first, press that back so that the hem finishes this way. You don't want to do it the other way because that would show too much. This is the way to lap that. Lap this first, this over, and then you would finish that hem at the very end. We need to stitch this onto the front of the coat first, of course. On the other side, the underlap, this edge will get bagged out with the lining, and then the hem will be turned up, and there's our beautiful clean finished vent. We want to make sure that the underlap is not longer than the overlap. Turning this over, we don't want to create this effect where the underlap is sticking out from underneath. We want this to be beautifully even, if not ever so slightly a breath longer so that it flows. Here at the top we have the saddle seamed in the flat seam method at center back, and you wouldn't actually draw in the grain lines. I did that because it's a teaching sample, and this is just flat lined on the side back, the arm, shoulder, neck, and on the other side as well. And then I like to do a little light hand cross stitch here from the saddle back just to the seam allowance, just across there, so there's no chance of this bunching up and being lumpy across the gentleman's shoulders. And that's the method for the vent and the back saddle.